And this is Real Estate Underground.
Greetings and salutations, Real Estate Undergrounders. It is Ed Matthews again with the Real Estate Underground. Thank you so much for making us a part of your day. I know how busy you all are, and I'm grateful for the listen. Today is a really interesting show. I am joined by Daniel Angel Mejia, and he is with Apex Development Group. Daniel, welcome to the show. I'm really excited to have this conversation because you happen to run a business very similar to mine, and I want to ask you how you do it so I can get down to best practices.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ed, for having me. Pleasure to be here. Pleasure to meet you.
My pleasure. So for the folks who haven't discovered you on LinkedIn or elsewhere, why don't you tell us a little bit about you and your company?
Yeah, of course. A little bit about me. Originally from Colombia, South America, born and raised there. I had the opportunity to go to school here. Then I went back to Colombia to go corporate life initially in the finance world. That took me to the real estate world initially there. And then about 10 years ago, I got the opportunity to get back to the States while I was working corporate job in a cement and ready-mix company. I decided to take some steps on the side in the real estate world, specifically in the residential world. And that's how everything started. Initially doing some flipping, trying to capture all the experience I had from some funds I used to work for back home. Slowly but surely started getting into some bigger until I decided and found that was the path I really wanted to take. Leap of faith, decided to close the chapter of the corporate life and started Apex. Fortunately enough, found my business partner now, also from Colombia. He used to live in Miami and decided to move to Atlanta. And that's where we joined forces and started this amazing path that we're still driving and trying to grow.
Okay, congratulations on your success. So let's talk about the business a little bit. So what niche do you tend to focus on? I know you do a lot of different things, but I'm curious where you tend to spend most of your days.
We've stayed within the residential space, and that initially covered more buying existing distressed properties, renovating and selling or renting. That has evolved into the multifamily space also. So nowadays we cover single family and multifamily. In the single family space, we did evolve into more construction, both for sale and for rent. In the multifamily space, we only acquire to execute value add programs. We basically revolve around that residential world in those three verticals: ground up for sale, for rent, and then acquisitions in the multi space or value add or plus approach.
Talk to me about your team. What does that look like?
Yeah. In 2021, we saw the need of starting to build a team around us. Initially, it was just the two of us and then another partner we used to have for the construction part of the business or the renovation part of the business. Right after COVID, we understood the idea of virtual approach and combined that with our roots and started building a team back home. Today, our team is split in those two locations back in Colombia, about 17 people with us covering different areas. We try to be as vertically integrated as possible. So trying to bring everything that we can in-house except for property management at this point, but anything that has to do with acquisitions, underwriting, structuring capital markets and stuff like that. Even managing some of the projects from there, parts of the process of project management from Colombia. So that's why we built that team there. And then the other part of the team is whoever needs to be on the ground, on the field, seeing and living the properties will be here. So it's about a 7-people team in Atlanta at this point.
Yeah, we have a similar model here, except our people sit in the Philippines, but similar concept. Are those folks in Colombia, are they employees or are they virtual assistants or a combination thereof?
Correct. And that's a great question. I know there's a lot of people going the VA route, which is also successful. Our approach was a little bit different. We actually have a company there and they are our employees and our team members. There's two advantages that we found there. One, time zone. So they work at the same time as we are. We're just sometimes of the year we're an hour off, but it works pretty well. They are our team. We know the culture. We are bilingual. We speak Spanish and English, which helps on the construction and renovation side tremendously. So basically, it ended up being a great advantage to our company and pretty much one of our differentiators at this point.
Yeah, it's a competitive advantage for sure. because not everybody I speak enough Spanish to understand if somebody's having trouble or to convey what I'm trying to get across, but I am by no means bilingual. So having the ability to speak natively is a huge advantage. So with regard to the changing markets, you're based in Atlanta. Where are your properties?
They are in Atlanta also, and that's another important decision we've made. With time, we've learned to make some of those decisions, which are important. So sometimes out of state and looking at other states and other markets is interesting and attractive. For us, it's like focus, being close to the asset, boots on the ground is really important, something that we have decided to stay on, at least for now. That doesn't mean we won't go to other states eventually, but I think the knowledge of the market, and I think to your point of like with changing markets and after the great run that the real estate world had from 2012 or 2011 to probably a couple of years ago, really didn't matter at this point. In our opinion, it's really important for you to know what you're doing, or know where you are, and understand the specifics of the submarkets. In Atlanta specifically, it's a pocket by pocket market. Maybe you got to be caught.
Connecticut's the same way where we operate. I was looking outside of Connecticut down in the Carolinas and then out in the Midwest a little bit, and came to the conclusion that the physical proximity is an advantage, right? Being able to be on site within an hour or two is a huge advantage. And mainly from a customer service and project management perspective, if somebody picks up the phone and calls you and says, hey, I need you on site first thing tomorrow morning, we got something important to talk about, to be able to not have to get on a plane and go do that is really helpful for sure. The other part of it is just being able to go out and touch the property every once in a while and be present there is also valuable, because especially in the multifamily world, the folks that live in your buildings want to be heard, right? They want to be seen. And when the boss is there, they know stuff's going to get done. That's always a good thing from a retention perspective, right?
That's exactly right. Yeah. To your point, our mantra for now is 2 hours at the most from site. It's been key to us. And obviously there's folks that are in smaller markets and it's a little bit challenging to find opportunities there. For us, fortunately, we're surrounded by 13 counties. It's a pretty extended metro area, so it's good enough for that. And then we have other potential expansion routes in close states where we can go at some point. But yeah, for now, metro.
Yeah, and the other thing you mentioned is really important, is understanding the markets and the dynamics. Here in Connecticut, there are, I would say at a macro level, there's probably three major markets, right? There's Fairfield County, which is an entirely different world, very much a growth market from a appreciation perspective. You got Central Connecticut, which is very much a cash flow play. And then you've got Northeastern Connecticut is again an appreciation because it tends to trend after Worcester and indirectly Boston. But I live literally in the middle of the state, and it's 2 hours, it's 120 miles to New York City and 125 miles to Boston. So
Very good.
There are investors who focus on Fairfield County, and there are investors who focus on Central Connecticut, and there's not a lot of overlap. And because the market dynamic is so different.
I think there's something interesting that you mentioned regarding the different strategies depending on the market or the sub-market. One avenue that we found to keep transactions going, regardless of the dynamic of the market, at some point we were trying to focus more on multifamily. But then 2022 and 23 happened where transactions just didn't make sense. We say it's a bit drastic here, but nobody kicked us out of single family. Why not go back? You can keep it going, keep churning.
Yeah.
And then within single family, there's some sub-market that will be suitable for sale product, and then some that will be more cash flow plays for rent. And that's when the whole fund came to be, where we can commingle all these strategies, take advantage of the fact that we have different particularities of the different submarkets within the market that we are. And then we can approach everything, find opportunities suitable for each one of the strategies.
So I ascribe to the exact same strategy. Take what the market's giving you, right? There's no reason to shoehorn a strategy into a market that isn't going to respond to that strategy. It's better to understand the inventory is low in this particular market. So as we build rehab houses, it makes sense to sell those and so on. I'm curious about the fund. What made you go down the path of building a debt fund versus private equity fund or just working with private investors on an individual basis?
Of course, that very interesting question. It has been a work where we compiled a lot of experiences, feedback, and what we believe ended up being like a good balance for passive investors, right? So initially, the way we raised equity and the way we went about our projects was typical 506B or LPGP structure, where we would raise equity from friends and family or an individual check writer, and then go about each project. Then for each project, that meant at that time, one multifamily project with one specific approach or a portfolio of single families with one thesis, right? Whether it was for sale, for rent, or a combination or whatnot. What we found with time and with the variations of the market is that sometimes you hit singles, sometimes you hit doubles, sometimes you foul, and sometimes you have a grand slam. But when you go one at a time, your investors could be a single, a double, or, and there's always an or, right? Basically, we found what we think most investors, not all of investors, but most investors are looking for is whenever they go the passive route, they want certainty, flexibility, and know what they're getting. The IRR, double digits, 20s, 30s, whatever, that sounds great. Once they start realizing it's a target, not a certainty,
Right.
then things can get a little bit iffy, right? Our approach with that was, this is our business, this is our passion, this is what we're going to be doing for the rest of our lives. But for investors, it could be something for some years, potentially for the rest of their lives. So we came up with this idea of a fixed return debt fund. And the reason why it's debt, it's not that we're originating debt. For investors, they're creditors to the fund, but they have a fixed return. Now I guess like thresholds or tranches, depending on the amount they invest, but they know what they're getting. They can have a compounding effect, which can get them to the double digits that usually investors are trying to reach, but they also have flexibility. So if something comes up, in our case, it's a lockup period of 18 months. If something comes up for whatever reason, they can go out without having to liquidate a property or sell or wait for whatever time, right? So when you start talking to, and this applies for individuals, in our experience at least, individuals, family offices, whoever it is, you can have a long-term vision. Life happens. What happens if, I don't know, I have a need, something, a kid graduated, and someone needs for school, or every kind of different particularity that can happen. With a GPLP structure, the answer nine times out of 10 is, oh, sorry, we can't sell the deal. With this structure, we found what we believe is a great balance of good return, certainty, flexibility, cash distributions if they need it, or full compounding. So it's a combination of various factors that we have compiled with time based on our experiences and feedback from investors, and it's working pretty well.
Yeah, we find the same thing. The whole concept of allowing somebody to be able to stay in the fund and compound their returns, at some point that turns into some pretty good money. And it's fairly,
Absolutely.
yeah. And I like one of the things that I had done with our own debt fund is the exact same thing. There's an 18-month lockup, and then there are periodic opportunities to pull your money out if you need it. Somebody's getting married, somebody's going to college, medical bill, whatever.
Some investors at some point want to get a little bit more active and want to buy their own stock, and that's perfectly fine. We just feel that the flexibility adds a lot of value for investors. And our point really is just trying to build a diversified portfolio that people can rely on. So it's just serving investors at the end.
To each their own. All right, Daniel. Hey, I talked about what I mentioned before we started recording. I can talk about this stuff for days, and you've built a tremendous business. Congratulations. But I would like to get into the final five, our lightning round, if you'll indulge. All right. First question is always about purpose, right? I'm curious what gets you out of bed on Monday morning. I know you've done very well, and the mortgage is paid, the car payments are probably paid off, and kids' colleges are taken care of, and yet you still get up and go to work in the morning. So, what drives you? What's your purpose?
I would split that in two. There's the personal side, which really happened after I started, basically after I left corporate and started my own thing, is enjoying the ride. That's how I call it. And it's just making sure, regardless of what's happening, good or bad or ugly, just enjoying every minute. So to me, it's like, sometimes I don't even know if it's Monday or Sunday. It's just enjoying every minute. We're on a timer at the end of the day, and we are at the end of that timer. So it's just make sure you enjoy every second. From a company perspective, or let's call it Apex perspective, is being able to build a professional and strong team. Something I feel very proud of is the people that we work with, and the fact that we've been able to get back to our roots, that we left our country. We can build something at home without having to be at home. Working with great professional people and being able to build something around that is something that it's very close to my heart.
Awesome. Yeah. And I couldn't agree more. I think that there's a contribution that gets me out of bed in the morning. It's that you're helping people get where they want to go. Right. Yeah.
True.
All right. So I'm always curious about your mentors and coaches along the way. Talk to me about the best advice you ever got. And I'm curious who gave it to you.
It's one of my mentors. It's someone I would have liked to work with while I was at corporate, but I didn't have the chance. I worked alongside in some ways, but never liked him to be one of my mentors or bosses. And that never got to be that, but then converted him in one of my mentors. Still there, great guy. The best advice that I got from him was when I was planning on going back or getting back to the States. I was kind of hesitant at the time because I was enjoying a great career there. But he said, just try it, but make sure you burn your ships. The meaning at the end of the day is just don't look back. And it was something at the time, it was generated some fear, but it was great advice. For anyone that's taking a leap in any moment of their life, I think great advice always.
Yeah. My reference to Cortez, for those folks who are not history geeks like me, is when Cortez reached the New World, he had his men burn their boats, and he strangely found that they were highly motivated to make it work. Right.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also interested, fundamentally believe that we learn way more from the mistakes we make than the successes that we have. And I'm curious about a decision or a mistake, something that you'd love to have back. And what was it and how'd you recover?
The other one's a little bit more like personal. The Apex one is not bringing construction in-house sooner, and honestly find it amazing when I find groups that are able to work with outside construction. We were never able to make it work, and there was always something until we brought it in-house. That's something that I would have done sooner.
Excellent.
And the personal, I should have left corporate sooner. Should have started sooner, basically. Never late. But
could have been faster. Yeah, I agree. How do you take in information? Like as a leader, I'm sure you're always reading and listening to podcasts and audiobooks and all that. So I'm curious, what is the method that you sharpen the saw with? And also importantly, who are you paying attention to these days?
Obviously, podcasts and books are a great source that I rely on. I also follow LinkedIn. There's a lot of information on LinkedIn, some doesn't, but I'm a LinkedIn believer. Few folks there, Jay Parsons, for example, that offers great information, great feedback with real substance. For us, that's important, just kind of like to follow trends, understand what's going on. There's a lot of variables and like too many sometimes to really get aligned, understand. But I think finding those kind of people that are offering interesting, fundamented information, in my opinion, is always good. And then keeping a couple books around, I think, is always good too.
Yeah. What are you reading these days?
Right now, Fraction.
Gino Wickman. Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. It's an annual read for me.
Is it? Wow. To me, it's first time, and we're definitely gearing towards that EOS approach. I found it's interesting because it's just so simple, but it just makes sense. Like a couple of things that we've implemented are starting to look pretty interesting.
Yeah. It's this way to make a very complex system fairly manageable. And we've had a lot of leaders on this show who are also EOS entrepreneurs. And to a person, they say it's really hard to implement in total, right? Yep. So I find that a lot of people do what you and I do, which is read a chapter, understand a concept, and then apply the concept to the business without having to go through the whole EIS consulting.
Exactly. That's the approach we're taking, at least for now, like understanding section by section, trying to implement and apply, and eventually, probably at some point, we reach out. In our opinion, it was like, let's understand first before we just get bombarded with too much information.
Yeah, because it can be overwhelming for sure. So talk to me about success. Like, how do you define success in your life, in your professional life, and even in your personal life, if you want to talk about that.
Yeah, of course. Professionally, for us, Apex is evolving growing our portfolio and our capabilities to a fully development capable group and team where we can get to a point where we can develop ourselves communities and multifamily and stuff like that. Will take a couple or a few years probably until we have enough reps under our belt. I think once that's going, success will follow. That's more like from a company perspective, right? At a personal level, to me, is combined with the purpose I mentioned earlier, is just understanding that every situation in life, whether it's good or bad, it's temporary. So just making sure that you're enjoying what you're doing. To me, this is my passion, not only real estate, but just the fact being able to things together, building teams, working with people, working as a team, and just making sure we can be or add value to everyone, even at a personal level. That, to me, that's success.
Awesome. All right, sir. When you're not talking about real estate with geeks like me, what do you like to do for fun?
I like to ride my bike. I used to run until my knee decided not to. Biking. I always enjoy a nice restaurant. Also spending some time with my wife and friends. And I love traveling too.
Fantastic. Daniel, I've really enjoyed this conversation. If folks want to learn more about you or Apex, what's the best way to get in touch?
Our website is a pretty good route, apexinvestments.us. Email is always a great tool, also dangel@apexinvestments.us. And in LinkedIn, I'm pretty active there. Daniel Angel Mejia, which I think would be the best 3 ways to reach out, and happy to have as many conversations like this one as possible. I really love it.
Daniel, thank you again for joining us, and it's a pleasure to see you and continued good success.
Thank you so much. Pleasure to be here.
This has been the Real Estate Underground podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. It helps us grow. Until next time, happy investing.